He offered a little girl a home as a joke. She took it seriously, and he had absolutely no way out. Sophia was 7 years old, and she had already lived in 5 different houses. None of them hers. No parents, no family, no one who remembered her birthday. Just a small girl with dark hair and old shoes who somehow ended up at a charity gala in January, standing near the door like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there. And that's where Richard Harlan saw her. 54 years old, worth more money than most people will see in 10 lifetimes, standing in the middle of a ballroom full of people who all wanted something from him. He looked at Sophia the way people look at something they don't quite understand, and not with cruelty, but with the kind of carelessness that comes from never having had to think too hard about anything. He said it like it was nothing, like it was a joke between adults that a child wouldn't fully understand. You want a family, little one? There's a piano right there. Play something good, and maybe I'll take you home. The people around him laughed. Richard smiled. He took a sip of his drink, and Sophia walked toward the piano. Now here's the thing nobody in that room understood yet. They saw a small girl in a worn-out dress walking toward an instrument she probably had no business touching. They saw a funny moment, a cute story to tell at the next dinner party. What they didn't see, what they had absolutely no way of knowing, was that Sophia had been alone with music for 4 years. No teacher, no lessons, just a donated upright piano in the basement of a church shelter, and hundreds of hours of silence and trying and listening and playing until her fingers stopped making mistakes. She hadn't learned music. She had lived inside it. The piano in that ballroom was a Steinway grand, black, polished, sitting under a chandelier like it had been placed there specifically for this moment. Sophia climbed onto the bench. Her feet didn't reach the floor. Her hands were tiny against the keys. The room was still laughing somewhere behind her. Then she started to play. The first few notes were quiet, soft enough that the people nearby had to stop their conversations to hear it. It wasn't a song anyone recognized, and no classical piece, no famous melody. It was something she had made herself, something built out of every night she had spent alone in that church basement. Every morning she woke up in a house that didn't feel like home. Every time someone smiled at her with their mouth but not their eyes. It sounded like all of that, every single bit of it. By the time she reached the second minute, the room had completely stopped. Not politely stopped. Not the way people go quiet when they feel like they should. Completely stopped. Glasses down. Conversations over. Phones in pockets. Every single person in that ballroom was facing the small girl on the bench who still couldn't reach the floor with her feet. Richard's champagne glass was on the table beside him. He didn't remember putting it down. He was standing at the front of the crowd now. He didn't remember walking there either. The music moved through something that felt like loneliness, and not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the real quiet kind. The kind that lives in empty hallways and unanswered questions and waiting for someone who doesn't come. And then it shifted, slowly, like the sky changing color before sunrise. It moved into something that sounded like hope that doesn't quite trust itself yet. And then, in the last 2 minutes, it arrived somewhere that felt like warmth, like a door opening, like the exact moment a person realizes they are finally, actually safe. When Sophia stopped, she didn't bow. She didn't look at the crowd. She just sat there with her hands in her lap and looked at the keys in front of her. The room was silent for 3 full seconds. Then it fell apart completely. People were clapping. Some were crying. A woman near the back had her hand over her mouth. And Richard Harlan, a man who had fired executives without blinking, who had sat across from presidents and never once looked nervous, was standing in the middle of all of it with something on his face that didn't belong there. He looked broken open. He walked through the crowd. People moved without him asking. He stopped at the edge of the piano bench, and Sophia looked up at him for the first time since she sat down. She wasn't hopeful. She wasn't afraid. She was just waiting. He sat down beside her. He was a big man and the bench was small, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "I didn't learn it," she said. "I made it." He looked at her. Then he looked behind him at his wife, Elena, warm eyes, navy dress, tears moving quietly down her face, not trying to stop them. "I said something stupid earlier," Richard said. "Yes," Sophia said. He almost laughed. The kind of almost laugh that lives right next to something real and heavy. I meant it though, he said quietly. The part about taking you home. Sophia looked at the keys. Then back at him. I'd have to bring the music. We have a piano, Elena said softly from behind them. And Sophia thought about it. She thought about the church basement. She thought about the cold walk that night. She thought about 5 houses and 5 bedrooms and 5 families who were kind but never really hers. She thought about how music was the only thing in her life that had never left. Okay, she said. What followed was 6 months of paperwork. Social workers and interviews and background checks and a family court judge who, according to everyone who was in the room, cried during the final hearing, and who later told his clerk it was allergies. On a Tuesday morning in July, Sophia Harlan went home for the first time. The piano in the Harlan house was a Bösendorfer, bigger than the Steinway, richer sound. Sophia played it the first evening, for 4 hours straight, and only stopped because Elena knocked on the door and said dinner was getting cold, and even then she finished the phrase she was in before she stood up. Richard had never been a still person. He ran 3 companies. He traveled constantly. He was the kind of man whose assistant had a separate calendar just for his meals. Sitting quietly was not something he did. But every evening when Sophia played, he would stop. He'd sit in the leather chair by the window, close his eyes, and stay there for as long as the music lasted. Elena would sometimes stand in the doorway and watch the two of them. This enormous, serious man and this small, serious girl, both perfectly still, connected by something that had no name. He told a close friend once at a dinner where he'd had enough wine to say true things, that he had spent his entire adult life collecting things that were expensive: art, properties, companies, experiences. He said the music was the only thing he had ever been given that he knew, without any doubt, that he did not deserve, and that, he said, was exactly why it meant more than all of it. There is a version of that night at the gala, where Richard finishes his drink and moves on, and Sophia walks back across the ballroom and nothing changes. That version exists. It almost happened. But a 7-year-old girl with old shoes and a song she built from nothing decided to walk toward a piano instead of away from it. And a man who said something careless had just enough honesty left in him to admit it. Sometimes the most important thing that ever happens to you starts as a joke. Sometimes the smallest person in the room is carrying the thing that changes everything.